Creating movement. Okay, today we're going to talk about creating movement from Chapter 5, the production process. Now, when you are creating movement in film or video, there are three basic types, and that is by moving the subject, by moving the camera, and by editing. Within each of these, there are different movements and different ways to achieve things, but today we're only going to talk about subject movement and by moving the camera. Now, in a lot of these slides, you're going to see a rounded rectangle, and that is going to be considered the frame. We're going to pretend like that's what you were looking through. If you were using your digital video camera right now, recording whatever is within the frame is what you would see. When you're doing the subject movement, there are three different directions that you can move within the frame. We'll start out talking about the x-axis, which runs horizontally. And then we have the y-axis, which runs vertically. And also the perceived z-axis, which is the most powerful, but you should use it very cautiously and make sure that you are getting the best shot with that. Now, in Western culture, one of the things that is believed is that if you move from left to right, that it suggests that you are moving forward. And so it's considered forward motion. Like if you were going ahead in time, you would scan from left to right across your frame. So understandably, if you go from right to left, that is backward motion, and it's considered like you are going back in time. So be cautious of that whenever you're filming, and make sure that you're not giving a perceived time that you're not trying to convey. If you were trying to go forward, don't be panning from the right to the left with your camera. Now, if you were to divide your screen up into 9 different sections, you would see, of course, we have the upper left, upper middle, upper right, middle left, center, middle right, lower left, center, and lower center, and then lower right. Now, pay close attention to the lower right. What usually typically happens is your eye begins towards the upper left-hand side of the frame and ultimately rests at the lower right-hand side of the frame. And what that means is, you always need to be cautious of putting your most critical information to the lower right, because it's where your eye always ends up, maybe a price for something, your address, a phone number, just any type of critical information you need to be cautious of and make sure that's where you are putting it in your frame. Now we're going to talk about camera movement. In order to pan your camera to the right, this is like you're looking at the top of a camera setting. To pan your camera to the right, you're going to move the tripod handle to the left, and that will pan your camera to the right. So understandably, if you wanted to pan to the left, you're going to twist the tripod handle to the right, and that would pan your camera to the left. Another movement that we have with the camera is to tilt the camera up, and in order to do that, when it's on the tripod, you push down on the tripod handle, and that will tilt your camera up. So down, you're going to push up or pull up on the tripod handle, and that will tilt the camera down. One other movement you need to be cautious of is to move the tripod up. I'll show you what that looks like, and also to move the pedestal or tripod down. That way you can adjust the height for what you're needing to film. One other type of movement that we have is called dolly in. And typically what you see with that is, a tripod or something on wheels. And to dolly in, you move toward the subject being filmed. And in order to dolly out, you move the tripod away. And this can also be done with a crane, but just as long as the camera is on something that's mobile, that's on wheels that you can move in and out away from the subject, then you will be able to dolly in and to dolly out. One of the last types of camera movements we're going to talk about is called truck pan. And what that means is that you keep the camera and the subject. So if you were to move to the left, you can see that the camera and the subject stay parallel to each other. And so if you were to move to the right, they continue to stay parallel. Like if you were moving along your x-axis or your y-axis, just as long as they stayed parallel with each other. One of the types of movement that we have using a camera is called movement through zooms. You need to be very cautious of using this. While it's a great and easy way to zoom in and create movement within your camera, one of the problems is that it doesn't always better to just dolly in or dolly out because it creates a more realistic shot, as you can see when I hit the next slide. It doesn't look very real. So let's talk a little bit more about the Z-axis. The Z-axis is actually something that is considered like third dimension. It's perceived, but it does not actually exist. It just appears when you're looking at something on a screen in the two-dimension state. So you need to make sure that when you do this, you are very cautious of what you are filming. Try not to arrange subjects, in a straight line. If you have objects on the table or in a frame, or when you're filming a person, if you were to shoot straight on at the person, it makes them look heavier, and they're not going to like that, and it also adds width. And so the best thing to do is to stay away from shooting the straight line. Instead, go in at the angled line, the angled approach. That's kind of a three-quarter view, but you always need to make sure that the eyes of the subject you're filming are visible. And you can see here, this just looks more, it's more interesting than just a straight-on look. The last thing we're going to talk about is the graphic force movement. What this means is a big, dark, colored object next to something that's small and light-colored. It just gives the impression that it's unbalanced, and the dark object is just heavier. So you need to kind of be cautious with the weight of what is within your frame. And you also don't want to put objects that are not alike at all, maybe something that's got really rough, jagged edges. You don't want to put that next to something edge. Now, if you look at this frame, you can see that if you are to set this one dark top heavy paint can on the right side by itself, it pulls the frame to the side, and it creates a feeling of unbalance, and that's unsettling for the viewer, so that's something you want to steer away from, or just be cautious of how you are doing that. Another thing you want to be careful about is using putting the heavy objects on top. If you see in this frame, it just doesn't look possible, but it also takes away from the bottom, and your eye just keeps wandering. It's not a good setup. So just place the objects according to size within your frame. Now, this one I don't mind as much on this frame. We have a large paint can next to a small paint can. You can see that the small one is attracted to the red one. It does pull your eye more over to the left, but this frame setup was more in line with the rule of thirds, and it's a better layout. But just be cautious that when you put something small next to something large, it will attract the larger object will attract the smaller object and look closer together. Okay, and another thing to be cautious of is putting the heavy object it makes the top feel empty and unbalanced, and it just makes it feel bottom heavy and is just not balanced for the frame. And that is the end of our lesson. And if you have any questions, just feel free to type them in or send me an email.